We're going to talk about what has happened in Ukraine on this day of the Russian invasion. We'll examine the actions and the strategies, both military and political. Now, if this is your first time watching, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor who's built multiple leadership programs at Charleston Southern University. So we'll also view these events through the lens of leadership. And I also wrote a book about Zelensky called I Need Ammunition, Not a Ride, and you can find it on Amazon. Okay, it is day 106. Here's what's going on in Ukraine. Now, Russia has been pummeling Severodonetsk and to a lesser degree, Lysychansk. And they're either going to capture it or they're going to utterly destroy it. They're going to turn it into a pile of rocks. That's just the way that they're fighting this war. It is barbaric. One Ukrainian commander explained that we're fighting house to house on every street. But he also went on to explain that but now they're simply covering both their own troops and our units with artillery. So they're fighting house to house and they're being shelled. Both the Ukrainians and Russians are being shelled by the Russians in an attempt to just wipe out whatever's there on the Russian side. Now, I mean, that's amazingly bad, but that's what's going on, and they have to hold on until they have enough artillery, and they don't have the pieces yet. In other news, a Russian court in eastern Ukraine, that's in one of the controlled occupied territories, sentenced two British citizens and one Moroccan fighter to death. So both Britons were serving in the Ukrainian Marines. So that would make them, according to the rules of law, active duty soldiers. But the Russian occupiers, they're not having that. They're claiming that this is terrorism, that is, quote, crimes against peace, and they've opened more than 1,000, actually more than 1,100 cases of these kind of war crimes. That's going to be very bad because that's going to get into a tit for tat if we're not careful. Okay. On the kind of political front, Zelensky spoke by video to the Time 100 Gala. He was recognized as Time's most influential person of the year, and I think that's very fair that he should be nominated at that. And it seems like, wait, why is he taking time to speak to this gala? Because he's getting his message out. That's why he's doing it. He said this quote. And I love what he said. Like, listen carefully to what he said and the words that he used. He said, quote, when I learned that I was named the most influential person of the year, I took it as a recognition of what all our people are doing. Notice how he's not saying, hey, look what I did. Look, but no, this is what Ukraine is doing. All Ukrainians who are defending the freedom and independence of our state. And I'm honored to be a leader above all for these people. So that was a good way of handling that. Now, he went on and told the audience that Europe was facing the worst war that it's seen in 80 years. They knew that. But he talked about something in a novel way. He talked about how the world recently weathered the COVID-19 crisis. And then he expanded that to the COVID-22 crisis, which I thought was a great turn of phrase. He said, when hatred knocks on your door, will you be ready? Will any face mask protect you from the Russian COVID-22? And why is the vaccine against it, weapons and sanctions, so difficult to get in sufficient quantities? Why do some countries pretend as if COVID-22 does not exist? That's a great question. I mean, he's using that now. It's a good analogy. Russian aggression, he has argued all this time, has spread like a contagious disease. We have to contain it here, and so it'll be interesting to see if the language of COVID-22 catches on in popular media or if it just goes by. But I mean, it was a good idea to explain it that way. His second address of the day, he spoke to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And in this speech, he argued that Russia was not only attacking the institutions that we are, living in, but the very idea of the rule of law itself. He said this: Russia's war against Ukraine, and more broadly, Russia's aggression against all the rules of life in Europe and the world have dire consequences. And he talked about what they are: basic interests, peace, security, freedom, free trade, predictability of life. Like, Russia was attacking all that. He was making Russia is making the rest of the world unstable by essentially thumbing its nose at the rule of law. That's what he was saying, and I think to some degree that's very true. In other news, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the impending food crisis leaves 1.6 billion, that's billion with a B, people in 94 countries severely exposed. And it was, quote, threatening to unleash an unprecedented wave of hunger and destitution, leaving social and economic chaos in its wake. Now, here's now this was fascinating. Meanwhile, Putin, who has claimed that he's the aggrieved party and he has to do this because the neo-Nazi aggressors in Ukraine were forcing his hand, and the Americans, and their puppets were forcing his hand. It's the 350th birthday of Peter the Great, and so he's celebrating it, and he likened himself to Tsar Peter the Great. And he described the land that Peter the Great conquered, which was, by the way, the Baltic states and Finland. So, like Estonia and Latvia and Finland. And then he added like a really telling phrase. He said he was returning it and strengthening it, like to Russia. He was returning that land to Russia. And then he added another very ominous phrase. He said, well, apparently it has also fallen to us to return and to strengthen. And that's a little bizarre. And he added one more thought, and none of the countries of Europe at that time recognized it as Russian. And I think that was one of the most telling, revealing, like this is the way that Putin is thinking. Okay, that's it for day 106. Come back tomorrow for day 107. Hey, if this video was helpful, hit like to help others find it in YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe so that you can stay informed. And one more thing, if you are moved to contribute to the humanitarian aid for Ukraine, I have a link below for Samaritan's Purse. If you want to give, be sure to give only to reputable organizations. There's a lot of scammers out there. Thanks for your time.